I stepped into our cozy Chicago brownstone suitcase, still rolling behind me after the red-eye flight from New York, expecting nothing but London's arms and the smell of fresh coffee she always had waiting. The living room was packed, instead voices, overlapping laughter bouncing off the walls, my mother-in-law Mrs. Harrington beaming like she had won the lottery as she steered a tall suited man toward the couch where London sat rigid in the navy dress I bought her last Christmas. Eliana, you are back early, this is perfect, come meet Michael. He is an accountant, stable, church-going, and ready to build a real family. We have been planning this surprise for weeks to help London see the right path. The words landed like ice water down my spine because the family that had barely tolerated our 3-year marriage was now openly setting my wife up on a blind date, right in our home. As if I did not exist, as if the rings on our fingers were invisible. I stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of the week-long marketing conference melting away into pure disbelief, my heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the introductions. London's eyes locked on mine across the room, wide with panic, and something else, guilt maybe, or the exhaustion of fighting alone while I was gone. And in that single glance, I felt every crack in our carefully guarded life split wide open. This was not just a misunderstanding, this was the family we had spent years trying to win over, now deciding for her that our love was a phase that needed fixing, and the price of their acceptance was erasing me completely. Mrs. Harrington kept talking, her voice bright and practiced as if she were hosting a charity brunch. Michael shook my hand politely, his grip firm but his smile awkward, clearly briefed on the situation yet unsure how to navigate it. London's sister Claire hovered nearby, nodding along, her phone out, probably texting more relatives to come witness this intervention, while London's father sat in the armchair flipping through a photo album of London as a child, pointing out milestones that did not include me. I wanted to scream, to grab London and run, but instead I forced a tight smile, set my suitcase down and asked through gritted teeth, what exactly is going on here? The room went quiet for a beat, then Mrs. Harrington sighed the way she always did when explaining simple truths to difficult people. We love you, Eliana, but London has been so lonely with your travel schedule. We thought a nice dinner tonight with extended family would remind her what stability looks like, real stability with a husband, children, the life she deserves. London finally spoke, her voice small at first, but steady. I did not ask for this, Mom. They showed up yesterday with Michael already invited, and the table booked for tonight at the club. I tried to call you, but your meetings ran late. Her words hung there, not quite an apology, not quite defiance, and I felt the first sting of betrayal twist in my gut, because part of me wondered how long she had let this brew without pushing back harder. The family had always been like this, polite on the surface, venom underneath, ever since we announced our engagement 5 years after meeting at that tiny art gallery downtown where London was showing her first graphic design series, and I was there scouting for a client campaign. We had fought for every inch of this life, moving from California to Chicago for my job, building a home that felt safe even when her parents visited and made passive comments about grandkids or sin, or what the neighbors would say. Now here we were, the surprise gathering already in motion, caterers due in 2 hours, relatives on their way, and Michael sitting there like a living symbol of the future they wanted for her. I pulled London into the kitchen under the pretense of unpacking my bag, my hands shaking as I whispered, why didn't you shut it down the second they arrived? We have rights, we are married, this is our house. She looked at me, tears brimming but not falling. Eliana, they cornered me with stories about how unhappy I look, how my work suffers, because I missed the traditional path. I started doubting myself again, just for a minute. The pressure is so heavy when you are gone for weeks. Her admission hit harder than the setup itself, because I knew that doubt. I had felt it too on long flights, wondering if my ambition was costing her the peace she craved, but hearing it voiced in our own kitchen while her family plotted in the next room made the moral weight crush down. We did not have time to hash it out fully. The doorbell rang, more aunts and uncles pouring in, all smiles, all knowing looks, all ready to play their part in this intervention. I watched London move through the crowd, graceful but brittle, smiling at the right moments, deflecting questions about children with vague answers, while I stood on the edge feeling like the intruder in my own marriage. Decisions had to be made fast: stay and fight publicly, or pull her out and risk the family labeling me the villain forever. I chose to stay for now, swallowing the rage and the fear, because walking away would hand them the victory they wanted, proof that our love could not survive real life. The hours blurred into preparations, dresses adjusted, ties straightened, Michael making small talk about stocks and Sunday services, while Claire pulled me aside once, hissing, you should be grateful we are doing this quietly instead of cutting her off completely. Every word chipped at my resolve, every glance from London carried the silent plea for me to understand the impossible spot she was in. By the time the group loaded into cars for the short drive to the private club downtown, I had replayed our entire history 100 times, the late nights designing logos together, the quiet vows exchanged in a small Massachusetts courthouse to escape Illinois laws, the way her laugh could erase any bad day. Yet here we stood on the edge of a public spectacle, where one wrong word could shatter everything we had built. And the cost of silence felt just as steep as the cost of speaking out. Inside the club, the lights were warm, the tables set with crystal, and the air thick with expectation. Relatives I barely knew filled the room, whispering about how beautiful London looked, how lucky Michael was, how this was the intervention she needed after years of confusion. I sat beside her, my hand finding hers under the table, squeezing hard enough to remind us both we were still us, but her fingers trembled and I wondered how much longer she could hold the line. The first course arrived, conversations turned, pointed questions about future plans, kids, schools, church, and I felt the news tighten with every polite deflection. London laughed at a joke from an uncle, but her eyes were distant, the internal war visible only to me, the woman who had loved her through every storm. As dessert plates were cleared, Mrs. Harrington stood tapping her glass for attention, the moment I had dreaded all evening, and the crowd hushed expectant. She began her speech about family values, second chances, God's design, and how tonight was the beginning of healing for London. My chest tightened, ready to interrupt. But before I could move, London rose slowly, her chair scraping loud in the sudden silence, her voice cutting through the room, clear and unwavering. That single motion shifted everything, the air changed, the faces around us froze, and I knew in my bones that whatever came next would either save us or destroy us completely. The price of truth finally demanded in front of everyone who had tried to rewrite our story. London stood there under the soft chandelier, light, her shoulders straight for the first time all night, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the polite acceptance they expected. Instead, her words came measured but fierce. I cannot do this anymore, Mom, Dad, Michael, everyone here. I appreciate the intention, but this blind date, this whole setup is not what I want, because I am already married to Eliana, and I love her with everything I have. The life we built is real, and I will not trade it for the version of normal you keep pushing on me. Gasps rippled through the crowd, chairs shifted, Michael looked stunned as if slapped, and Mrs. Harrington's face drained of color, her hand flying to her chest like the words were a physical blow. I sat frozen beside her, my heart exploding with pride and terror at once, because she had just done what I had been too afraid to force her into, publicly claiming us in front of the very people whose approval had haunted our marriage from day one. The aftermath hit like a wave of fire. Her father slammed his fist on the table, demanding to know if she had lost her mind. Her sister Claire burst into tears, accusing me of brainwashing, while aunts muttered about sin and delusion, and the club staff hovered awkwardly near the doors, unsure whether to intervene. Michael excused himself quietly, his exit the first visible crack in their perfect plan, and I stood up beside London, my arm slipping around her waist, the only solid thing in the chaos. We are leaving now, I said, my voice louder than I intended, but the family closed in, voices overlapping, accusations flying. You are selfish, Eliana. You are tearing this family apart. London, think of your future, your soul, your legacy. Every word carved into me the guilt I had carried for years of being the career-focused wife who traveled, the one who pulled London into a world of sideways glances and whispered judgments, now laid bare as the villain who refused to let go. We made it out to the parking lot, somehow the cool night air slapping our faces, as we climbed into our car, doors slamming shut, the engine roaring to life, while phones already buzzed with incoming calls and texts from inside. London was shaking, her hands clasped tight in her lap, tears finally spilling as she whispered, I am sorry I let it get this far. The pressure built while you were gone, the calls every day about how lonely I must be, how empty our home is without children. I started questioning if I was being fair to you, to us. Her confession cracked something deep inside me, because I had seen the signs, the shorter answers during video calls, the forced smiles when I returned, but I had chalked it up to my absences, not realizing the family was waging a quiet campaign the entire time, exploiting every doubt. I reached over, gripping her hand as we drove through Chicago streets, the city lights blurring past, promising that we would face whatever came next together. But inside, the fear gnawed. How much would this cost her? The relationship with her parents, the support network she had relied on since childhood. Back home, the brownstone felt different, colder, the remnants of the afternoon gathering, scattered wine glasses, half-full napkins crumpled like evidence of the invasion. We sat on the couch in silence, at first replaying the scene, her bold statement, the looks of betrayal on her parents' faces, the way her sister had hissed, you will regret this when the world turns on you both. I pulled her close, my fingers tracing the wedding band on her finger, the one we chose together in a small shop in Boston, after the courthouse ceremony, because Illinois still felt unsafe back then. The internal storm raged in my own mind. Was I selfish for wanting her to choose us over them? Had my job, my ambition, created the space for this manipulation? And now that the truth was public, what doors would slam shut for her at her design studio, for me at the marketing firm, where partners already side-eyed our marriage during company events? The next morning brought the first wave of consequences. Her mother called at dawn, pleading, then demanding, then threatening to cut contact completely if London did not apologize and meet Michael for coffee to make amends. London listened, her face pale, but her answers firm. No, Mom, I meant every word. I am not confused. I am not broken. I am in love. And that is not going to change. When she hung up, the silence was heavier than before, and I saw the cost already etching lines around her eyes. The woman who had always been the peacemaker in her family now cast as the rebellious daughter, the one who chose sin over salvation. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen island talking through the night about our early days, the way she had sketched my portrait on a napkin during our second date, the promises we made to never let the world dim what we had. And yet here we were paying for that promise in pieces of her family. By afternoon, texts flooded in from cousins, uncles, even old friends from church who had been looped in by her mother, painting me as the outsider, the career woman who stole their daughter. One message from Claire cut deepest: you always knew she was vulnerable after college, the drinking, the confusion, you took advantage. Now look what you have done to all of us. I showed it to London expecting anger, but she just closed her eyes, the moral weight pressing down, because part of her still loved them, still ached for their approval. And the dilemma tore at her: should she reach out, try to explain, soften the blow, or stand firm and risk permanent fracture? I held her as she cried, the decisions ahead looming large. Her job might suffer if clients tied to family networks pulled away. My promotion at the firm was already in talks, and whispers of lifestyle choices could kill it. We spent the evening making lists, practical ones: what to say at work, how to handle holidays, the financial buffer if support vanished. But beneath it all, the psychological toll mounted, the constant replay of her public stand, the empowerment mixed with grief for the parents who once read her bedtime stories, now viewing her love as a tragedy. I questioned my own role in the lead-up, the trips that left her exposed, the times I had brushed off her hints of family pressure as temporary. But now the betrayal felt mutual. I had not protected her enough, and she had not trusted me enough to confide sooner. The night ended with us tangled on the couch, whispering vows renewed. But the price was already climbing, and the road ahead looked darker than any we had walked before, the family pressure only beginning to tighten its grip. The week after the club dinner unfolded like a slow unraveling, thread by thread, the family machine kicking into high gear. Mrs. Harrington called every morning, alternating between tears and scripture quotes, her voice cracking as she reminded London of the baptism dress, the family vacations, the dreams they had for her wedding that never matched ours. I listened from the other room, my stomach twisting, because each call chipped away at the woman I loved, forcing her to relive every moment of doubt, the nights she had wondered aloud if children would complete her the way society promised. Work became its own battlefield at the marketing firm. Colleagues who had once toasted our anniversary now avoided eye contact in the break room. And my boss pulled me aside during a strategy meeting, mentioning that the client from the conservative Midwest account had asked for a different lead. Subtle but clear, the prejudice was spreading. London faced it at her graphic design studio. To a major client owned by a friend of her father's, suddenly requested revisions that dragged on for days, code for delay, until she apologized or the family relented. She came home one evening, her sketchpad clutched tight, her eyes red from holding back tears. They canceled the project. Eliana said it was creative differences. But I know it is because of the dinner, the statement I made. Now I am the cautionary tale at their family dinners. I pulled her into my arms, the guilt flooding me because my absence had left the door open for this. The travel that once felt necessary for our future now seemed like the crack the family exploited. And the moral dilemma gnawed deeper: was my career worth the isolation that made her vulnerable? Was our independence selfish when it cost her these pieces of belonging? Flashbacks haunted me during sleepless nights, the first time we told her parents 4 years ago, the dinner table silence. Then the quiet suggestion that it was a phase, the therapy they offered to fix it. We had pushed through, moved forward with the marriage in secret at first, then open but never fully accepted. And now the public declaration had forced the issue into the open, the societal machine grinding against us with whispers at the grocery store, stares at the gym, old friends unfollowing on social media. One betrayal cut especially deep. Claire showed up unannounced at our door, her face set in righteous anger, handing over a letter from their mother outlining the terms: disownment unless London sought counseling, and distanced herself from me. I watched London Reddit, her hands steady, but her breathing shallow, the internal conflict playing out in real time, the daughter, who wanted to honor her roots versus the wife who refused to deny her heart. We argued that night for the first time in months, voices raised not at each other, but at the impossible choice the family presented: choose love and lose everything, or choose peace and lose yourself. I accused her of wavering, she accused me of not understanding the weight of blood ties. And in the heat I stormed out, driving through Chicago streets until the anger cooled enough to realize we were both paying the price of years of compromise, the small concessions we made to keep family dinners civil, the holidays split, the vacations skipped. When I returned, she was waiting on the porch, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and we held each other, the decision crystallizing we would not bend. But the cost was mounting, her savings account already earmarked for a new studio, now needed for legal fees if things escalated, her sleep fractured by nightmares of being alone. The social fallout spread wider. A mutual friend from college posted a vague status about standing for traditional values, and the comments tagged London with prayers and offers of support for leaving me. I felt the isolation close, in my own family distant, but supportive, still lived across the country, unable to shield us from the daily erosion. And the psychological toll showed in small ways, London sketching less, her once vibrant designs turning muted, the light in her eyes dimming under the constant judgment. I questioned everything in quiet moments at my desk. Was it right to encourage her stand when it meant watching her lose the people who raised her? Or should I have suggested compromise, a softer approach that preserved some ties even if it meant hiding parts of us again? The dilemma tore at my core because love demanded truth, but truth demanded sacrifice, and neither of us knew if we could survive the full weight without breaking. By the end of the month, the family had organized a prayer gathering without us, the church bulletin listing London as needing guidance, and the isolation settled like fog over our home. We talked late into the nights, mapping the betrayals: the sister who leaked private messages, the mother who weaponized faith, the father who stayed silent but funded the pressure, and each revelation deepened the scars. Yet in those conversations something shifted, the awakening beginning as we listed what we still had: each other, the apartment, the jobs we could fight for, and the decision to document everything in case legal lines were crossed. The price was real, tangible, but so was the clarity that came from refusing to let prejudice rewrite our story. And as another call from Mrs. Harrington went to voicemail, I felt the first spark of resolve that maybe this fracture was the only way forward, even if the road was paved with loss. The ultimatum arrived via certified mail on a rainy Tuesday, the envelope thick with legal language and emotional pleas: the Harrington Family Trust revised to exclude London, unless she completed 6 months of faith-based counseling and lived separately for at least a year. I watched her open it at the kitchen table, her face paling as she read the clauses that treated our marriage like a contract, breached the inheritance she had quietly counted on for her aging parents' medical bills, now dangling like bait. The moral weight pressed down harder than ever because this was not just words, this was their final leverage, the trade-off between financial security and the love we had sworn to protect. And I felt the guilt surge again, my career stability, contrasting her sudden vulnerability. The choices I had made that left us exposed. London sat with the letter for hours, her fingers tracing the signatures, the internal storm visible in every sigh, every tear she wiped away. I gave her space, but the silence stretched until she finally spoke. I never thought they would go this far. The money was never about greed, it was about the safety net we talked about for when we have kids through adoption or surrogacy. Now it feels like they are buying my soul. Her words echoed the deeper conflict, the dream of family we had whispered about late at night, now weaponized against us, the societal expectation that a woman must choose legacy over love, the prejudice that painted our union as barren and broken. I suggested we consult a lawyer immediately, but she hesitated, the first real crack in her resolve, the pull of blood and history tugging against the woman she had become with me. And I wondered if this was the moment where sacrifice became too heavy, the point where one of us might break under the pressure to choose peace over principle. That weekend she drove to her parents' house alone despite my protests, the decision made in quiet determination, to face them without me as a buffer, to see if words could still bridge the gap. I paced our empty home, the hours ticking by, each minute a battle with my own doubts. Was I pushing her too hard toward confrontation? Or was stepping back the right call to let her navigate the family ties I could never fully understand? When she returned after midnight, her eyes swollen, her voice hoarse, she collapsed into my arms. The meeting had been brutal, accusations flying, her mother on her knees begging her father, quoting verses about obedience, and the sister recording the entire thing for later ammunition. London had held firm, repeating her love for me, the validity of our vows. But the near betrayal moment came when her mother offered to restore everything if she just moved back home for a trial period. And she admitted the temptation flickered, the ease of surrender, the relief from constant judgment. But in the end she walked away, the choice made, but the emotional cost etched deep. The days that followed blurred into strategy sessions, late night talks about selling the brownstone if needed, relocating to a more accepting city, my promotion hanging by a thread after a client pulled out citing values misalignment. I faced my own confrontation at the firm, the HR meeting disguised as career planning, but laced with questions about work-life balance and public image, the subtle threat that my visibility as a lesbian executive was becoming a liability in conservative accounts. The betrayal stung because a colleague I had mentored for years had leaked details from the dinner to upper management, framing it as instability, and I realized the prejudice was not just external, but woven into the professional world I had fought to climb. London supported me through it, her hand in mine as I drafted responses, but the mirror reflection showed us both fraying, the woman who had once designed bold campaigns now questioning her own boldness, the wife who had stood tall now carrying the weight of two families' expectations. We found small anchors in the chaos, weekend drives along Lake Michigan, the quiet moments where we remembered why we fought, the first kiss in the rain, the shared apartment in our 20s, the way her laugh could light up any room even now. Yet the pressure mounted. Another letter arrived, this time from the church board suggesting pastoral counseling, the community we had once attended pulling away, and the isolation forced decisions about new support networks, online groups for couples like us. But nothing replaced the empty seat at family tables, the holidays looming empty. I wrestled with the right and wrong of it all, and sleepless hours was encouraging her to reject the ultimatum, the moral high ground. Or was it cruelty to watch her lose her roots for a love that society still questioned? And the answer never came easy, only the certainty that backing down now would erase the woman she had become. By the end of the month we had met with a lawyer, the documents reviewed, the fight formalized. But the emotional toll showed in London's thinner frame, my shorter temper, the arguments that flared over small things, the dishes, the laundry, the unspoken fear that this might break us after all. One night she turned to me in bed, her voice barely a whisper. I almost said yes to the trial separation just to stop the pain, but then I saw you sleeping, and knew I could not pay that price. The awakening settling in that our love was not the problem, the prejudice was. And the only way forward was through the fire, even if it burned everything else away. We held each other tighter that night, the decision reaffirmed, but the cost continued to climb each day, another piece of the old life slipping away, the family silence now deafening, the future uncertain, but ours to shape. The climax built slowly over the following weeks, the family escalating from letters to public posts on social media, framing London as lost, and me as the deceiver, the community rallying with prayer chains and offers of intervention. I returned from a shortened work trip to find our mailbox overflowing with church pamphlets and handwritten notes urging repentance, the psychological warfare relentless and targeted. London had spent the days alone drafting her response, a long letter to her parents laying out every hurt, every moment of doubt. She had overcome the logic tight and emotional, the words pouring out, the years of hiding, the fear of losing me, the realization that compromising would mean losing herself. I read it over her shoulder, my heart aching because this was the ultimate trade-off, her past for our future, the moral dilemma crystallized in ink. And the decision to send it felt like stepping off a cliff. The response came fast, her father calling, this time his voice cold and final. The trust is gone, the door is closed until you come to your senses, the words landing like final nails in the coffin of the relationship she had fought to salvage. I held her as she processed the loss, the internal awakening accelerating as she listed the prices paid, the holidays alone, the empty bank account for legal fees, the stares at the grocery store. But also the freedom, the clarity, the strength that came from no longer performing for their approval. Work delivered its own blow, my promotion denied in a closed-door meeting, the reason couched in budget cuts. But the subtext clear, the firm could not risk the optics after the dinner story spread through industry circles, a betrayal from within that forced me to confront my own sacrifices, the career I had poured everything into now stalled because of who I loved. We faced the lowest point that weekend, packing boxes in case we needed to move, the conversations turning raw as I admitted the guilt of my travels, the times I had prioritized deadlines over her loneliness, the way my ambition had left cracks for the family to exploit. London countered with her own confessions, the moments she had entertained, the what-ifs, the normal life, the ease of fitting in. And in the honesty the bond deepened, the understanding that both of us had carried secret burdens, the moral choices that shaped us into the women standing together now. The tension peaked when Claire showed up again, this time with their mother in tow. The confrontation on our doorstep, voices raised, accusations flying, the mother pleading one last time for London to think of the family name, the legacy, the pain she was causing, while Claire recorded on her phone the betrayal complete. London stood her ground, her voice steady as she repeated the truth of our love, the validity of our marriage, the refusal to be fixed. And in that moment I saw the full awakening, the woman who had wavered now unshakable, the decision made with eyes open to the costs, the lost inheritance, the strained friendships, the professional setbacks, but also the integrity intact. I stepped beside her, my arm around her waist, the united front that sent them away, the door closing on the old life with a finality that echoed through the house. The night that followed was one of quiet reflection, the two of us sitting on the floor surrounded by half-packed boxes, talking through the next steps, job searches in friendlier cities, new support circles, the possibility of starting a family on our own terms, and the realization that the price, though steep, had bought us something priceless, the freedom to live without apology. The emotional rock bottom gave way to the first glimmers of hope as we researched apartments in Portland, the city that felt like a fresh start, the decisions deliberate, the sacrifices acknowledged, but the love at the center stronger than ever. I booked tickets for a scouting trip, the action forward, the choice to rebuild rather than retreat, and as we lay in bed that night the weight lifted slightly, the knowledge that we had faced the fire and emerged not unbroken, but forged new, the moral battle won in the only way that mattered, by choosing each other despite everything. The months that followed the final confrontation brought a new rhythm to our days, the move to Portland completed in a blur of U-Haul trucks and goodbye waves to the few friends who remained loyal. We settled into a small house near the river, the mountains visible on clear days, the air cleaner, the community more open. But the scars traveled with us, the quiet moments when London stared at old photos, the nights I woke from dreams of boardroom rejections, the family silence that stretched across state lines like an invisible wall. We paid the price in small daily ways, the holidays spent just the two of us, the birthdays without cards, the financial strain of rebuilding careers from scratch, my new marketing role at a startup, London's freelance clients slowly returning through word of mouth. But the awakening was real, the understanding that those losses had revealed our core, the love that had survived every test. We talked often about the journey, the initial shock of that return home, the bold stand at the club, the ultimatums and betrayals that forced every internal conflict into the light, the moral dilemmas of loyalty versus self, the trade-offs that shaped us into stronger versions of ourselves. One evening by the river with the sunset painting the water gold, London turned to me, her hand in mine. I do not regret a single word I said that night, because it freed me from the cage of their expectations, even if it cost the family. I knew the happiness we have now is honest and ours alone. Her words echoed my own thoughts, the sacrifice had been worth it, the pain had carved space for genuine peace, the prejudice that once defined us now just background noise in a life we chose every day. We began building again slowly, a new circle of friends, couples like us, artists and professionals who understood the journey, the plans for a family through adoption taking shape, the designs flowing from London's studio with renewed color, my campaigns winning awards in a company that celebrated diversity. The costs remained visible in the empty seat at Thanksgiving, the unanswered calls on her birthday, but they no longer defined us, the resilience we gained, the trust rebuilt stronger after the doubts, the awakening complete in the knowledge that love demanded courage, not compromise. We took long walks along the trails talking about the future, the lessons learned, the way family pressure had nearly broken us, but ultimately clarified what mattered most, the decisions we made in the fire, the price we paid willingly, because anything less would have been living half a life. Looking back at the Chicago brownstone, the club dinner, the letters, and the tears, I see the full arc, the shocking return that exposed the cracks, the public statement that shattered the plans, the gradual climb through betrayal and loss to this place of quiet strength. Our story is not one of easy victory but of deliberate choice, the kind that comes with real consequences, the kind that forces every woman involved to examine her own heart, the family that lost a daughter, the wife who risked everything, the partner who learned to listen deeper. In the end, was it right for London and me to prioritize our love over family expectations and societal approval despite destroying those bonds? Or should we have compromised to preserve the peace, even if it meant denying who we truly are?